January 31st, 1943. The frozen Don River groans under sheets of ice, its waters creeping through shattered embankments. Smoke curls lazily from charred factories and hollowed-out apartment blocks. You can almost hear the whispers of a city that once roared with life, now reduced to echoes of gunfire and the crunch of snow beneath heavy boots. General Georgy Zhukov rides at the head of his motorized column, his fur-lined coat stiff with frost. The air is bitter, cutting through even the thickest gloves. The streets of Stalingrad, which had witnessed months of relentless urban warfare, are eerily quiet. Not a single German soldier in sight. Only the remnants of destruction, toppled lampposts, burned-out tanks, and the skeletal remains of armored trucks abandoned in haste. "Where are they?" a junior officer mutters, scanning the horizon with binoculars. Zhukov doesn't answer immediately. His gaze sweeps over the empty avenues, the gutted factories, the shattered bridges across the Volga. The silence itself is deafening, carrying the weight of months of brutal combat and thousands of lives lost. You step closer to the riverbank and the smell hits: charred timber, frozen mud, and the faint metallic tang of abandoned ammunition. Scattered letters flutter across the snow, caught by the wind, messages from soldiers who'd once held these streets with grim determination. And then, suddenly, a child's doll, its face cracked, half buried in ash. A stark reminder that this was a city, not just a battlefield. For weeks, Soviet intelligence had anticipated a stubborn German defense, fortified to the last bunker, the last building. But now, the streets are empty. The Nazis, encircled and exhausted, have vanished almost overnight. Entire divisions left behind their artillery, their rations, their wounded. The horror of the Battle of Stalingrad had reached a climax, yet the aftermath is unlike anything Zhukov or his generals could have predicted. A lone tank rumbles forward, its tracks shoving snow aside, revealing the jagged crater where a German Panther tank once stood. Inside, the Soviet crew exchanges uneasy glances. They had expected ambush, sniper fire, booby traps. Instead, the city yields to them as if surrendering its secrets quietly, without a fight. Zhukov dismounts, crunching through debris. His boots hit a warped metal sheet covering a collapsed cellar. Beneath it, the faint groan of a trapped German soldier echoes. One, two, not thousands, most had fled. The realization dawned slowly. The Germans had not been defeated here by force. They had abandoned their positions, leaving their strongholds hollow, their plans unraveling in a desperate bid for survival. And yet a deeper unease creeps in. If the enemy left so quickly, what does it mean for the next phase of the war? Could this retreat signal not just defeat, but something more? Panic, confusion, a crack in the Wehrmacht that even Hitler could not repair. Zhukov's eyes narrow as he surveys the silent factories, the scorched bridges, and the empty barracks. Something monumental is happening here, something no one could have fully predicted. The first civilians begin to emerge from hidden cellars, gaunt and wary, their eyes wide at the sight of Soviet flags unfurling over the city. They clutch each other, trembling, whispering stories of nights filled with artillery shells, of families lost, of neighbors turned into shadows. Their presence makes the emptiness of Stalingrad even more surreal. The city is theirs now, but at what cost? And then over the distant roar of artillery on the outskirts, a rumble grows. Not German fire, not Allied support, something else. Zhukov freezes. Something in the ruined cityscape seems alive. Waiting, watching, the rumble grows louder. Zhukov's officers tense, fingers tightening on maps and rifles. You can almost feel the cold pressing in from every direction, the kind that seeps into your bones, making every shadow seem alive. The streets are littered with remnants of the German retreat. Abandoned field kitchens, rifles still stacked neatly in corners, crates of ammunition left untouched, as if their owners had simply vanished into the frost. In one ruined apartment, a half-burned calendar flaps in the wind. January 1943, the same month that the encircled Sixth Army had been strangled by Soviet pincers in Operation Uranus. You crouch, examining the debris. A half-eaten loaf of bread lies on a table next to a tin of condensed milk. Simple things, ordinary, yet left behind in the chaos of panic. It's the kind of evidence that makes a city feel haunted, not by ghosts in the literal sense, but by the human cost of retreat. Zhukov moves cautiously down a side street. The silence is punctuated only by the occasional crack of frozen masonry settling under its own weight. He stops in front of a gutted command post. Maps still cling to the walls, some marked with red lines tracking Soviet advances. Others, hastily scribbled with German notes, are torn and crumpled. You can almost hear the officers who made those notes, shouting orders that now echo only in the wind. Then they find the first bodies. Not battlefield casualties, but soldiers who'd been too weak to retreat. Frostbitten, malnourished, clutching rifles as if, in the last moment, they'd held onto some sense of duty. The sight hits the Soviet officers hard, a silent testimony to the human toll of Stalingrad's encirclement. You can almost feel the weight pressing down, the mix of triumph and horror that Zhukov must carry as he surveys the scene. Amid the ruins, a curious discovery. A series of hastily buried supply caches, notes written in German left beside them. Some indicate orders to regroup at distant towns, others plead for reinforcements that would never arrive. The Wehrmacht's plans lie scattered like autumn leaves in the snow, fragmented and unreadable to anyone who might try to piece them together. Zhukov studies one note, his eyes scanning the shaky handwriting. Hold until reinforcements arrive. But reinforcements had been swallowed by the Soviet encirclement weeks ago. The futility of it is almost poetic. And yet, the most unsettling discovery comes from the city's outskirts, the river crossings. Bridges that once served as arteries for retreat are either blown to rubble or abandoned mid-construction. Tanks and trucks abandoned halfway across frozen ice seem suspended in time, as if frozen mid-escape. You can see why the city seemed deserted. The Wehrmacht left everything behind in a desperate, disordered flight, leaving Stalingrad like a trapdoor opening beneath their feet. Zhukov signals for engineers to examine a partially destroyed train depot. Inside, locomotives are immobilized, coal still stacked in hoppers, freight cars full of supplies that could have fed thousands. He runs a hand over the metal, worn and cold, and wonders how quickly the Soviets can turn this against the Germans. Victory feels both tangible and surreal, like a dream you're afraid to wake from. Then a signal flare arcs over the city, red against the gray winter sky. From the horizon, more Soviet columns appear, some infantry, some mechanized, ready to fill the gaps the Germans left behind. Zhukov watches them approach and a thought creeps in. Stalingrad isn't just a victory, it's a turning point. The Wehrmacht is broken here, not merely by combat but by the collapse of morale and coordination. But in the shadows of Stalingrad's ruins, another question lingers, gnawing at the back of every officer's mind. If the Germans abandoned this city without a fight, what are they planning next? February 1st, 1943. The air is a sharp knife across your face, carrying the stench of smoke, blood, and frozen mud. You follow Zhukov as he climbs a ruined apartment block to survey Stalingrad from above. From this vantage, the city looks almost unreal, an intricate lattice of destruction, blackened factories, twisted streetcars, and empty squares that had once teemed with life. Not a German soldier in sight, only the faint, eerie trace of retreat. Zhukov's eyes scan the horizon, resting on a partially destroyed river bridge. A Panther tank lies half-submerged in the icy dawn, its turret twisted as though it had turned in resignation. He gestures to his aides. "The Germans thought they could survive by retreating," he murmurs, voice low but firm. "They underestimated what encirclement means. They have lost Stalingrad, not tomorrow, not after weeks, but today, in this very moment." The realization spreads among the Soviet officers. The Sixth Army, once the pride of Hitler's Eastern campaign, had been reduced to a hollow shell of its former strength. Morale shattered, soldiers abandoned their posts, leaving behind weapons, supplies, even their wounded comrades. This was not just a tactical victory, it was psychological. The Wehrmacht's aura of invincibility, built over years of blitzkrieg campaigns, had fractured here, in the frozen heart of Stalingrad. As the Soviets advance into the city, small groups of civilians emerge from basements and ruined homes. You see the faces of those who had endured months of siege, women whose eyes are wide with disbelief, children holding tattered toys, old men clutching photographs of family members lost to artillery fire. Their gazes follow the advancing T-34s, a mix of hope and grief in every glance. For these people, Stalingrad's liberation is immediate and visceral, yet the cost remains impossible to measure. In the factories, engineers begin inspecting abandoned German machinery, lathe machines, diesel engines, and ammo presses. Some could be repurposed almost immediately, a windfall of industrial resources that the Germans had taken years to install. Zhukov notes the irony. The city, once an industrial jewel feeding the Axis war machine, could now fuel the Soviet advance even further. Victory, it seems, is as much in the spoils left behind as in the men marching through the streets. But the most striking scene unfolds in the central square. Rows of German rifles lie in neat stacks, left untouched, as if the soldiers had simply evaporated into the cold. You can almost hear the echo of orders never carried out, the final breaths of commanders who chose retreat over surrender. Zhukov walks slowly among the weapons, his breath visible in the frosty air. He knows that the enemy's disordered withdrawal is more telling than any battlefield maneuver. Stalingrad has become a symbol of what happens when strategy collapses under pressure. And then, from a distance, the first signs of German counterintelligence appear. Abandoned notes, partially burned, hint at directives still trying to control a situation spiraling out of their hands. Maps marked with arrows pointing to distant towns, radio codes left scribbled in German, and lists of supply depots, all speak to chaos at the heart of Hitler's command. Zhukov realizes this is more than a victory. It is proof that the Axis power's dominance in the East has begun to crumble in a way no one could have predicted a year ago. Yet even in this moment of triumph, an unspoken tension fills the streets. If Stalingrad could fall without a fight, what horrors await beyond the horizon? The German army may be broken here, but war is still raging. Zhukov's mind races with the question every commander fears. What is the enemy planning next? And who will pay for it when they strike again? February 2nd, 1943. The morning fog clings to Stalingrad like a shroud, muffling every sound except the distant crunch of Soviet boots on broken cobblestones. You step cautiously through the streets with Zhukov and his staff. Everywhere you look, there are remnants of the German retreat, destroyed vehicles, artillery pieces frozen in mid-fire, ration crates spilled across the snow. The city feels both conquered and haunted. In a narrow alley, a Soviet soldier points to a series of footprints in the frost, German boots leading away from the factories, the barracks, the warehouses. The tracks vanish into the horizon, leaving behind the chilling certainty of abandonment. You notice a half-collapsed apartment building. Inside, a German field hospital lies frozen in time. Beds still made, surgical tools scattered, notes scribbled in a trembling hand. No patients remain, only the silence of a people who fled in desperation. Zhukov walks past a row of gutted tanks, stopping before a Tiger Eye, its turret caved in by artillery fire. He examines the metal, brushing away snow, and mutters something to his aide. The sheer scale of the German retreat becomes clear. This is no orderly withdrawal. It's chaos incarnate, the result of hunger, encirclement, and despair. He knows that capturing Stalingrad isn't just about controlling buildings. It's about understanding the psychological collapse of the enemy. The Soviet soldiers move cautiously, wary of traps, mines, and ambushes, though none appear. Everywhere they turn, evidence of panic stares back. Maps half-torn, journals abandoned mid-entry, even personal belongings left as though their owners had simply vanished. In the rubble of a once bustling cafe, a lone pair of eyeglasses lies atop a scorched table, next to a diary with pages fluttering in the wind. You pick it up and read fragments of German soldiers' last thoughts. Confusion, fear, the desperate hope to escape encirclement. Outside the central factory district, Zhukov halts the column. Smoke rises from a distant bakery, its ovens long extinguished. He surveys the frozen streets, the skeletal remains of tram lines, the shattered Volga bridges. He realizes that Stalingrad has become more than a victory, it is a statement. The Wehrmacht, once seen as unstoppable, has been undone not just by Soviet firepower, but by the relentless pressure of encirclement, the brutal winter, and the collapse of morale. And yet, even as Soviet flags rise over the ruins, a subtle unease lingers. The Germans are gone, yes, but their strategy, their cunning, has not been entirely defeated. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other divisions remain, still capable of counterattack. Zhukov knows that the war is far from over, and that the true test is not simply occupying Stalingrad. It is ensuring that the city's fall signals a permanent shift in momentum. In the distance, a flicker of movement catches your eye. A shadow flits across a crumbling building, too quick to be civilian, too deliberate to be random. Zhukov narrows his eyes, sensing it too. Could it be a German reconnaissance team still lurking in the outskirts? Or perhaps stragglers seeking to sabotage the city before it is fully under Soviet control? The question hangs, tense and unanswered, as the T-34s rumble forward through the ghostly streets. And then another sound, faint but unmistakable. A whistle, high-pitched, shrill, coming from the direction of the river. Soldiers freeze, rifles raised. Is it a trap, a signal, or merely the wind playing tricks through the hollowed-out ruins? The mystery of Stalingrad's abandoned streets deepens, and every step forward carries the weight of potential danger. By midday, the Soviet forces have begun moving deeper into the heart of Stalingrad. The streets are littered with German equipment, rows of rifles stacked like monuments, ammunition boxes untouched, and trucks abandoned mid-turn in the snow. You can almost hear the echo of orders that were never followed, of soldiers who fled in panic, leaving behind everything that defined their combat strength. Zhukov inspects a half-destroyed warehouse, where crates of explosives and artillery shells sit undisturbed. Engineers quickly move to secure the supplies, knowing that these spoils could fuel the next Soviet push into southern Russia. The scale of the haul is staggering. Entire battalions, worth of rations, weapons, and machinery have been left behind. It is as if the Germans had simply evaporated from the city, leaving a skeleton of their occupation for the Soviets to claim. In one of the bombed-out factories, a group of Soviet soldiers discovers detailed German war plans, partially burned yet still legible. Maps indicate fallback positions, retreat routes, and supply depots that no longer exist. The Wehrmacht's strategy is scattered, chaotic, and desperate. Zhukov reads the notes carefully, recognizing the signs of a military machine that has lost its cohesion. The Sixth Army is gone, not by direct annihilation, but by collapse, from hunger, cold, and the relentless pressure of encirclement. Civilians wander among the ruins, some curious, some wary. Women clutch children, pointing out familiar streets now littered with the detritus of war. A man stoops to pick up a German helmet, dusting it off with trembling fingers. You can feel their mixed emotions, relief at liberation, grief for lives lost, and a lingering fear of what may come next. The city belongs to them now, yet the scars of battle will not fade. As evening falls, Zhukov pauses atop a ruined apartment block. The city stretches before him, a panorama of destruction and survival. He knows this victory is unlike any other. Stalingrad has been captured not through a single decisive assault, but through encirclement, attrition, and the collapse of morale. The psychological blow to Hitler's army is immense. The myth of German invincibility has been shattered on these frozen streets. Yet in the quiet between the distant artillery bursts and the soft crunch of boots on snow, a sobering truth emerges. The Germans may have abandoned Stalingrad, but they are not defeated. The Wehrmacht still has the capacity to regroup, to strike, to retaliate. Zhukov's mind races with calculations and contingencies, knowing that the fall of this city is only the beginning of a larger struggle that will decide the fate of the Eastern Front. Then something catches the eye of a scout, a column of movement on the horizon. Too deliberate to be stray civilians. Could it be a German unit attempting to reclaim lost ground, or merely soldiers too slow to escape? The tension tightens like a wire across the city, a reminder that victory here is fragile, and the story of Stalingrad is far from over. February 3, 1943. The sun is weak, barely piercing the gray sky, casting long shadows across the frozen ruins of Stalingrad. Zhukov walks slowly through what was once the industrial quarter, crunching snow underfoot. Every overturned streetcar, every shattered storefront, every burned-out tank tells the same story. The Sixth Army's collapse was total, yet eerily incomplete. You come across a line of German field rations, half-eaten, strewn across a factory floor. Nearby, a soldier's journal lies open, pages damp from melting snow. The entries are desperate, chaotic notes of dwindling supplies, failed counterattacks, and the hope that reinforcements would arrive. But they never came. You feel the despair that must have gripped men who were trained to follow orders, to fight to the last, yet found themselves frozen in place, encircled, abandoned. Zhukov pauses by a partially destroyed tramline and gestures to a group of officers inspecting abandoned artillery. "Look at this," he says, voice low but commanding. "Every weapon left, every truck, every storehouse. It's evidence of a force unraveling from within, not merely from the battlefield." You can almost hear the echoes of German soldiers retreating, a silent scream that resonates through the ruined streets. In a side street, the first signs of civilian life reemerge. Families step cautiously from basements, rubbing frostbitten hands, eyes scanning for danger. One woman holds a child and points toward a fallen German officer's uniform, frozen stiff in the snow. The juxtaposition of life returning amidst the ruins of death is haunting. You feel the weight of survival pressing down, the fragile line between liberation and lingering terror. Zhukov ascends a half-collapsed factory balcony to survey the city once more. Across the Volga, smoke curls from distant fires where mopping-up operations are still underway. The German retreat has left a city frozen in time, abandoned fortifications, scorched earth, and scattered equipment. But more than the physical spoils, it is the psychological victory that strikes deepest. The Wehrmacht, thought invincible, has been broken. Not merely by bullets or tanks, but by encirclement, hunger, cold, and the relentless pressure of a determined adversary. Yet even in this triumph, a shadow lingers. Zhukov's eyes narrow as he scans the horizon. Reports come in. Isolated German patrols spotted beyond the city outskirts, reconnaissance units attempting to gauge Soviet positions. The enemy is gone from Stalingrad, but their presence, their capacity for vengeance, is not extinguished. The city may be won, but the war rages on, and the cost of this victory will continue to ripple across the Eastern Front. And then in the quiet of the late afternoon, a low rumble shakes the streets. It is not artillery, at least not yet. It is the sound of the city awakening, of industry resuming, of soldiers moving deeper into captured strongholds. Stalingrad is alive again, but alive in a way that makes you question. Can a city ever truly recover from what it has endured? The answers lie ahead, in the streets still shadowed by the ghosts of retreat. February 4, 1943. A bitter wind sweeps across Stalingrad, carrying with it the scent of frozen mud, smoldering ruins, and the faint metallic tang of abandoned weapons. Zhukov stands atop a ruined factory roof, watching columns of Soviet infantry move through the streets below. The city stretches endlessly, a chaotic tapestry of destruction, abandonment, and survival. You notice a half-collapsed German command post on the corner. Maps still cling to the walls, littered with hastily scribbled notes. Lines indicate retreat paths, fallback positions, supply routes that no longer exist. Zhukov studies them silently, absorbing the depth of the enemy's collapse. This was more than a tactical victory. This was a psychological rupture, an entire army undone not just by force, but by despair, starvation, and encirclement. In the central square, Soviet soldiers begin cataloging abandoned weapons and vehicles. Rows of rifles, artillery shells, and armored trucks are claimed, inventoried, and repurposed. You can almost hear the sigh of relief from men who had fought tooth and nail for months, now able to walk freely through streets once patrolled by snipers and stormtroopers. Each discovery, an untouched cache of ammunition, a functioning field radio, feels like a triumph of both persistence and strategy. Yet the city is not at peace. In the ruins of a theater-turned-barracks, Zhukov finds evidence of last-ditch German resistance, burned clothing, scorched mattresses, and notes scrawled in panic. The human toll of retreat becomes palpable here. You can almost hear the fear of the men who abandoned their posts, leaving comrades behind, and the echo of civilians' terror as the city shifted hands. Stalingrad's liberation is profound, but it is also grim. Across the river, smoke rises from mopping up operations, artillery firing at isolated pockets of resistance. Zhukov knows that despite the collapse of the Sixth Army, the fight is not entirely over. Small German units may still regroup, attempt sabotage, or conduct counterattacks. The war is far from done, and the shadow of what Stalingrad has endured will loom over the Eastern Front for months, perhaps years. As night falls, the first lights flicker in the surviving buildings. The streets are quiet now, but not empty. Civilians emerge from basements and hidden corners, their faces a mixture of relief and trauma. Children clutch tattered dolls, elders look skyward, and soldiers of the Red Army pause to absorb the gravity of the moment. Stalingrad is theirs, but the cost has been immense, and the city's scars are permanent. And then in the distance, a faint rumble grows. Not Soviet tanks, not artillery, something else. You squint into the horizon. Is it a German reconnaissance column, or merely a shadow of smoke from distant fires? Zhukov stiffens, sensing that even in victory, uncertainty lingers. The city may be captured, but the war's story is far from over. February 5, 1943. Dawn breaks weakly over Stalingrad, casting long, gray shadows across streets littered with rubble and frozen debris. Zhukov walks slowly alongside his officers, each step echoing through the hollowed-out shells of factories and apartment blocks. The city is silent, but alive with memory. Civilians begin to emerge more confidently now. Women gather firewood from burned-out buildings. Children run cautiously through alleys, their laughter hesitant, almost ghostly against the backdrop of destruction. Old men inspect ruined machinery in factories, imagining how these engines once powered German production, and now could power the Soviets' advance. You can feel the fragile heartbeat of the city returning, one cautious step at a time. In one courtyard, Zhukov encounters a group of German prisoners who had been too weak to retreat. Their eyes are hollow, faces streaked with frost and grime. They speak in hushed tones, reluctant to meet the eyes of their captors. For them, Stalingrad is no longer a battlefield but a tomb. Zhukov listens quietly, absorbing the human consequences of the Wehrmacht's collapse. He knows that victory is never just measured in territory. It is measured in survival, in who lives and who dies, and in the fear that lingers long after the last shot is fired. Meanwhile, Soviet engineers move through the factories, assessing what equipment can be salvaged. Rows of German machinery, abandoned in haste, promise a windfall of industrial capability. Zhukov watches as the engines are restarted, the first signs of production since the city's liberation. In the midst of destruction, there is creation. The city that had once been a symbol of Nazi strength is slowly being reborn under Soviet control. Yet even amid triumph, unease hangs in the air. Scouts report movement on the city outskirts. German stragglers, isolated and desperate, still linger, testing defenses and assessing Soviet positions. Zhukov knows these remnants will not pose the scale of a threat the Sixth Army once did, but they are a reminder. Even in the wake of monumental victory, vigilance is necessary. And then, a discovery deep in a ruined apartment shakes the officers. A diary, hastily hidden, filled with personal accounts of the German retreat. Soldiers writing of fear, cold, and exhaustion. Families torn apart. ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. You can almost hear their voices whispering through the pages, carrying the human story behind the military collapse. It is a moment that reminds Zhukov and you that Stalingrad is more than buildings and tanks. It is the sum of the lives forever altered here. February 6, 1943. The sun barely rises over Stalingrad, its pale light casting long, eerie shadows across streets that had once teemed with combat. Zhukov walks slowly through the central square, the ground crunchy beneath his boots. All around, the silence is heavy, almost unnatural. Not a German soldier in sight, not a single shout. Only the wind, whispering through the hollowed shells of buildings and scorched ruins. You follow him as he passes abandoned vehicles, half-tracked armored cars, crumpled trucks, and artillery pieces left frozen mid-battle. Every piece of equipment is a relic of chaos, evidence of the Wehrmacht's hasty retreat. Zhukov studies the rubble, noting the patterns of flight. Units breaking apart, soldiers abandoning positions, morale shattered beyond repair. This is not a city won by blood alone. It is a city claimed by collapse, by the unraveling of human will. In a nearby factory, engineers begin cataloging abandoned German machinery. Conveyor belts, diesel engines, and even printing presses lie untouched, ready to be repurposed. Zhukov realizes that these spoils of abandonment are as important as the streets themselves. Stalingrad has become more than a victory. It is a treasure trove of industrial might that will fuel the Red Army's next campaigns. Yet the city is haunted. Civilian voices emerge from basements and hidden corners, cautious but growing in confidence. Children peek from behind ruined walls, women gather supplies, and elderly men wander through once familiar streets. You can feel their apprehension, their relief, their disbelief. They survived the siege, witnessed the Germans retreat, and now must face the aftermath. The rebuilding, the scars, the memories that refuse to fade. Zhukov pauses atop a collapsed building, surveying the horizon. Far in the distance, the faint plumes of smoke rise from scattered fires. Are these remnants of German sabotage, or simply the city still burning from the relentless months of siege? He narrows his eyes, knowing that even though the Sixth Army has vanished from these streets, the war is far from over. Stalingrad has been captured, but at a cost so immense that it will haunt the minds of survivors and soldiers alike for years to come. And then a sudden piercing whistle cuts through the silence. It's faint, almost lost in the wind, but unmistakable. Soviet soldiers freeze, rifles raised. From the shadows of a distant alley, movement stirs. Stragglers, scouts, or perhaps a final, desperate attempt at sabotage by a German remnant. The city is won, but the story of Stalingrad is not yet finished. Every corner, every shadow holds the weight of possibility, and the question remains, what will emerge from the ruins next? February 7, 1943. The morning sky over Stalingrad is a muted gray, frost clinging to every shattered roof and twisted beam. Zhukov walks slowly along the banks of the frozen Volga, the river's icy surface reflecting the skeletal remains of bridges that once carried German reinforcements. The city stretches out before him, a patchwork of devastation, survival, and raw human endurance. Every street, every ruin tells the same story. The Wehrmacht, encircled and exhausted, abandoned Stalingrad without a fight. Zhukov can feel the enormity of what this means, not just for the Red Army but for the war itself. Hitler's army, long considered unstoppable, has been broken, not merely by bullets or tanks, but by cold, starvation, and the relentless pressure of encirclement. Stalingrad is more than a victory, it is a turning point. You follow Zhukov as he enters a gutted factory. Inside, engineers catalog abandoned machinery and weapons. Tanks, rifles, artillery shells, all left behind in the chaos. Civilians wander cautiously, beginning to reclaim their city, gathering firewood, clearing rubble, and emerging from basements for the first time in months. Stalingrad is slowly breathing again, yet the scars of siege are everywhere. Outside, Soviet troops secure the remaining streets, wary of stragglers or hidden traps. The city is theirs, but Zhukov knows this victory is only the beginning. Beyond Stalingrad, the Eastern Front is still a vast, dangerous expanse. German divisions may be weakened, but the war rages on. Yet here in these streets, a psychological blow has been struck. The aura of the Wehrmacht's invincibility has been shattered, and for the first time, the Red Army sees a path forward with hope and momentum. As Zhukov surveys the city, he notes the civilians emerging from hiding, women clutching children, old men picking through debris, children cautiously playing amidst ruins. Their faces are etched with fear, grief, and cautious relief. This is the human side of Stalingrad's capture, survival against impossible odds, and the fragile restoration of life in the aftermath of unimaginable destruction. And then in the fading light, Zhukov turns to his aides. "This is the moment the tide turns," he says quietly. "From here, the Germans will no longer dictate the East." You can almost feel the weight of history pressing in the sense that everything about the Eastern Front has changed, here in the ruined streets of a city abandoned without a fight. Stalingrad is a testament to endurance, strategy, and the fragility of even the greatest armies. The wind rises again over the Volga, carrying the distant echoes of battle and the promise of what is to come. Zhukov's gaze sweeps across the city, over factories, rubble, and frozen streets. Stalingrad is captured, but its story, the story of collapse, survival, and the turning of a war, lingers in every shadow, every corner, every abandoned building.